morning, everybody. Hope you're well. Welcome to my 7-week writing challenge. Today is day 9, I believe. My name's Hannah Velton. I'm a grief healer, writer and speaker. And this morning, it's a bit, lots has come through. A lot of things that I already knew about Christian. We've been writing together again this morning. The prompt this morning was all about asking for help. And it's become very obvious, having written with Christian, that he didn't ask for help. He went to Africa on this solo expedition. He found a book by Mungo Park, who was a 18th century Scottish explorer. And Mungo Park was asked by the African Association, who were based in London, to go out to find the source of the River Niger, which is in West Africa, with the intention of finding, I guess, there's a lot of talk about Black Lives Matter now and white privilege, and Mungo Park and the African Association were definitely out there to take African resources. There's so much I could say now. It might come out later in the film, but our family also had a lot to do with, over the generations, our ancestors had a lot to do with white privilege in Africa and actually in Australia as well. And I think part of the Christian was sort of saying this morning a lot of why he chose to go to Africa on his own, on a solo expedition. It was a lot to do with ancestral, what's the word? As a forgiveness. But again, that might come out in the book, but I don't know if it is relevant anyway, but it's like the importance of ancestral chains and also past lives that you've had. There's sometimes things, in a lot of cases, there's things you need to make amends for. Anyway, so Christian couldn't ask for help. He'd spent a long time in the Caribbean before going to Africa, and he'd lived with in amongst the black people in their communities. He had black girlfriends. He lived very much as a local, rather than possibly he would have been more expected to live with the expats. But that was not for him. He was always, when he travelled, he liked to travel alone, and he liked to travel in amongst the people and really get to know the people and the country. Anyway, when he came back from the Caribbean, certain things didn't work out for him in terms of a book he was working on. That was the reason why he'd been out there. And I think he'd moved to, I'm not going to mention where he'd moved to or anything like that, but he'd moved to a city which didn't really suit him. And he enjoyed, because he was a traveller, he enjoyed He talks a lot about the freedom that travel gave him and being able to find your own rhythm. And he liked to travel on his own, so he could find his own rhythm. And he liked to have the dust in his hair and, walking boots on all the time. And there's reasons why he liked to travel and why he liked to always have his freedom. He felt restricted in normal life. He was like a free spirit, and he continued to be. So things started to go wrong for him, really. He struggled in the city he was living in. The noise, and energies around him, he could never find that peace and stillness that he could get when he was travelling. And he never talked to me about it. I don't think he was truly honest with anybody about how he was feeling and what was happening within him and around him. And he saw this book about Mungo Park, and something sparked him in him, and there was no stopping him. If you read his book Proposal, he identified totally with Mungo. They were about the same age, 26, 27. Mungo was destined for a life in the Scottish borders as a doctor, and he wanted adventure. He couldn't see himself settling down. And neither could Christian at that point. He was desperate to get back out, to find his stillness and his peace and start walking again and travelling. And following in Mungo Park's footsteps was, he chose to free himself from the cage that he'd got himself into. It was up to him. He'd made the decision. A lot like me healing my grief. You can be a victim. You can stay in this cage of grief. I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know. I don't know if I actually realised I was in a cage of grief. I knew I was in grief, and I was trapped because I couldn't find answers. We couldn't. We tried so much in the physical world, in the realm, and just hadn't got anywhere. And I had to make a choice and ask for help, and that help came in the form of the non-physical realm. When you get desperate and you've tried everything, that's when you do open up to other alternatives, and you find the alternative exit outside of the grief cage. So Christian's exit for him, his alternative exit was to go travelling in Africa on his own. As I said, the ancestors were very much. It actually turned out to be something that he called it an act of redemption. The path to Africa was laid out for redemption, and I took it. Anyway, so Christian and I have talked a lot about his reasons for travelling to Africa. That was all part of our understanding and forgiveness process. And actually that all happened after I'd found out he was dead. Oh no, some of it happened before I knew he was dead. And then most of it, and where he was truly honest with me, was after we both knew he was dead. And we like to, when people die, there's an element of, we can't speak ill of the dead. And, their sort of secrets and how they really were sort of gets buried under a sort of glorification of how wonderful they were, or you don't tend to talk about the things that the nitty gritty, and actually it's that kind of nitty gritty and being honest and truthful that allows grief to happen. Allows healing to happen. So, there was an element of when Christian went missing and we had this party for him and everyone told lovely stories about him. But there was another side to Christian. It's not black and white. None of us are black and white. We have the side we like to show to everybody. And then there's the side that we would prefer not to show to people. And actually doing these films and writing the book is all about showing the grey areas. These have to be explored because you have to to truly heal, you have to be able to be honest and truthful, and you have to have get to that point of unconditional love between you. And that involves really, it's like really understanding the other person and then being able to forgive. So, that Christian and I, we had a great relationship when we were kids, absolutely great. But then he went off to a different school, and my world was shattered. I don't know if I've talked about this in previous films. I've written something recently, but I don't know if I actually talked about it. So I kind of put up barriers to him. It wasn't his fault. He was sent away to a different school. That was just as it was. But to protect myself, I put up inner barriers to him. They were all unconscious. And we all do that. We've all got unconscious protection mechanisms we put in place. We put boundaries in place. We put limiting beliefs in place. And actually that's all part about being in this sort of cage of grief, is that a lot of it is unconscious, subconscious. And you might not even know you're in you're in grief, because sometimes, it can be subtle, but also it can be personal grief, but it can also be a sort of collective grief or an ancestral grief that gets passed down, and a lot of ancestral grief, and this idea of redemption for past wrongs. That's strongly in our story anyway, and it might come out stronger as we go along. But anyway, so sort of the sort of idea of Christian being not hero worship, because that's not the right word, but you don't like to speak ill of people. And part of the problem with doing these films and doing the book is actually that people will see the other side of Christian, the whole of Christian, the good and the bad. And you'll also see the good and bad of myself. And it's taken us a long time to accept that that's okay. That's how the story has to be told. There's no point in hiding the dark stuff, because it's very easy to do that, and that's why there's so much grief and fear in this world. You can see it spilling out everywhere at the moment. Everywhere. So Christian and I are part of, the whole purpose of this is to be able to just tell the story and shine some light into that darkness, and to when Christian, I've just been speaking to somebody this morning about healing a grief. I didn't know how to heal grief. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know anything. It's not something that's spoken about widely, healing a grief. I didn't want to join a group. I didn't want to I want to deal with it privately. And I think a lot of having talked to a lot of people over the years, people are looking for a private and an inner way of healing grief without having to, spill all their emotions out in front of other people. Or I think when you're in grief, the last thing you need is actually to. And Christian, when he was in the city, he's talked about it this morning. I'll tell you what he said actually. Finding yourself is impossible in a place where energies mix so often, in a resort visited freely by all sorts. It's got a vibe, for sure, but it's not a place to find stillness and solace, which is what I was used to. Travelling alone, I had time and space to learn, as you have done, to be at ease with myself, my rhythms, and the dust in my hair and my walking shoes always on. There's a rhythm in walking, as we've already discussed. The freedom and the ability to do what you want and when you want, and in part with who you choose to spend your time with. The city was both chaotic and also others' energies freaked me. Trying to find peace for writing with disturbances, physical, emotional, social. At times it was only the dog who gave me calmness. He used drugs to try to combat the noise around him, of course, which gave him temporary relief. But even more maddeningly, they became an addictive crutch. I should have left the city to get my head straight, but for whatever reason he couldn't, and he panicked, and he kind of admits that. And the Mungo was like this shining light. I think he must have asked for help in how to move forward. He had to make a choice. It was up to him, as it's all up to us. Everything we do, we choose to put ourselves in situations and be in situations, and he wanted to get that freedom back, so he made his choice. And it's only now, when you look back, you can see all of this, how it all happened, and how, that wasn't anything about, it just had to happen. It was this certain situation and circumstances that made this trip happen. And that's it. There's no good or bad about it. It was just, this had to happen. And to get that sort of, and the other thing is, he obviously asked for help. He called out for help. Mungo appeared, or that idea appeared, and he ran with it. But also about asking for help. When he was in trouble in Africa, he got lots of visitations he described them as angels. We've talked about this before, and I've written about this. And he was always surrounded by children. He was like, children were so attracted to Christian. They always had been. And that's how he liked to get to know a community, was actually to interact with the children first. And then once you have the trust of the children, generally the adults open up more to you as well. The children really were his saviour in Africa in this trip, in a lot of ways. Plus obviously his angel visitations, and he actually got his freedom. Before it all started to really go wrong for him, he found his freedom again. That walking, his rhythm. He was doing what he loved. And we always take comfort from that, and that, obviously towards the end it wasn't good, but he really enjoyed that time. He must have had probably at least a month free and doing what he was wanting to do. Then when things did start to go wrong for him, there were these women, medicine women, and it was always women, actually, it was, that helped him, that picked him up, that gave him medicines, that looked after him, that were there for him in his hours of need. And actually, very early on in the journey, I used to have lucid dreams where I would, all I can say is like I would fly and I would be taken to meet him, and he was always ill when I met him, and he was being looked after by now I know the lady as Nana Joan. That's what he called her. And this lady was tending to him, giving him herbs and getting him better. Then I was always helped by women as well, in spirit. Not all of them, but initially early on I had Goddess Isis. And if you know the story of Goddess Isis and her husband / brother Osiris, and if you don't know the story, look it up. But essentially Osiris gets lost and cut up into pieces. He gets taken away and cut up into pieces, and Isis travels all over the place finding parts of him and brings them all back together and makes him whole. And as Osiris is he can no longer be alive, he becomes god of the underworld. Anyway, Isis, she's a goddess of love, she's a goddess of rebirth, of resurrection, and she helped me very early on with my building myself up. You know, when you look at the grief cage, the first thing you need to do is actually get yourself strong and have self-love, self-belief that you can actually get free of this. And you need help with that. You need pointers, you need help. Christian and I actually wrote a book. The first book we wrote, Lost and Found. It has an 8-pointed pathway to healing and growth after loss, and that is actually all about building yourself up, ready to fly free. I'll put a link in the comments for that book. So there's and then once I was ready to fly free, I had Oshun, who came and sat next to me a few films ago, and she's another African goddess. So Isis is an Egyptian goddess, and Oshun is a African goddess of love, of the river, I know her as dancing, as freedom, as like overflowing unconditional love. And she helped me while we were retracing Christian steps in Africa, as I've said before. So asking for help is, Christian didn't ask for help from us. And I don't think from anyone. He knew he had to help himself, and he chose to help himself. And I think that's what I did as well, actually. I didn't reach out and ask for help in the physical to anyone because I didn't know who to ask. When you have a missing person, especially, what were we now? In 2003, I didn't have access to help, and actually the only help I did get offered was from the police for a police liaison, and I never took that offer up because I didn't know what to do, what to say, So I guess if you don't have anyone or you don't feel able to ask for help necessarily, know that you can go inwards for help. You have all the healing and all the guidance and all the love that you need inside of you, but you do need to have that stillness, and you do need to have that openness. That doesn't mean that anybody who's watching the film, if you do want to reach out and ask people for help and it's available there for you, please do that. I'm not saying you have to do this on your own, especially not in the early stages, but know that when you're ready, or if the help is not overtly there, you can do this yourself. It takes strength, it takes courage, but you have to keep going. Don't give up on it. There's so many times during this journey that I've just gone, I don't want to do this anymore. This is too hard. This is too, it's going on forever. I just want to get on with my life. But every time sort of the trail went cold or something started to stop, and I'd think, right, that's it. I've finished. I can just go back to normal life. I can give all this healing up. Something would happen to kick it back into motion. It was like I'd reach a plateau. I'd be given a rest. I can see that now. And then I would move on to the next stage. So this whole journey was, I've said it before, it's like a marathon. It's not a sprint. You don't suddenly sprint and heal. It's like layers and layers over time. And it's a beautiful thing. It is. It's a releasing, and it's... but you have to kind of... So your cage is here and your freedom is here, whatever freedom means to you. And you have to bridge that gap. And that is through healing and releasing and understanding and forgiveness. And then you can fly free. And what you do once you fly free is essentially, like Christian and I have done, is to follow what brings you joy. It's that simple, really. And actually, being in a cage of grief can just be as simple as not feeling free. Like there's a niggle, that there's something else outside waiting for you, or you've got yourself into a situation where you feel stuck, directionless, like Christian did. You kind of get stuck, and you're not living the life that you feel you should be living. And this is all part of being in that grief cage. And yeah, there's a way out. There's a door. And that door is all inside, and it's all to do with stillness and really listening to what you want to be doing. And yeah, a lot of it is sort of repairing, revitalizing, untying knots and rebuilding. It's a lot about getting all the rubbish out and actually getting down to the foundations of who you are, and like telling all the truths and really getting it out. So I don't know if that's helped. Certainly Christian and I, there's things that we're writing about now which I can't share, which is too personal. But they might come out in the book. They might. It depends how they're written and how they flow with the story. So I shall see you tomorrow. If you have any questions, comments, and if you want anything clarified, we are working on something that we're going to offer for free, which we started working on yesterday, and then I just got tired, so we stopped. But it will be available through the my website, so I shall let you know as and when that's ready. But I think it will probably relate to something we've talked about today. Definitely. So anyway, if you do feel that you need help, do reach out for help, because if it's not available in the physical, it's available in the non-physical. And letter writing and writing is a perfect way to access that guidance and that help and that connection. But maybe we'll talk about that more tomorrow. Who knows what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So anyway, lots of love, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.